Behind me on the wall are some of my classroom rules that were developed by the students. And see, here's what happened. Beginning of the school year, the administration felt that it would be useful if we worked with all of our students to develop with them what our classroom rules would look like. I know there were some teachers that were stressed about that and like, oh, they can't figure out what it is, or they put up a list that said, what about this? What do you think? And everybody agreed with the teacher because of course they would. I went at it a little bit differently because why not? So first day that we did this, I asked each of my classes to come up with a list of rules. For my speech class, I had 1 period. For theater, I had 1 period. But for English, I had 4 class periods. And so for them, what I needed to do was something a little bit different. So each class period, I asked them to come up with a list of rules. And so they started individually, and then I had them get into groups of 3. And those groups of 3 each had to come up with their list of rules. And then in that group of 3, I said, okay, somebody's an A, somebody's a B, somebody's a C. Once we had that figured out, I said, okay, all the A's I want over on that side of the room. B's I need here in the middle, and all the C's over on the other side of the room. And they had to, again, combine into one list. So it started out with an individual list. Then it was a group of 3 with a list. And then it was a larger group with that. But they were all working off the similar list by the time they got to those 3. And those 3 lists were then put on my whiteboard. And so I put them up here on the board, and we wrote them all out, and then we worked at combining them into one list. So 4th period had a list, 5th period had a list, 6th period had a list, and 7th period had a list. We wrote them on a big piece of paper. The next day we came in, and I had all 4 pieces of paper up on the board. I said, all right, now let's look at these. 4th period, look at all these lists. How do we combine these 4 lists into one? And they made a list out of all that. 5th period did the same thing. 6th period did the same thing. 7th period did the same thing. So each of them were continually taking those same lists from themselves and from others and working them into one list. And then I took the final list and said, okay, out of those 4, where's all the similarities? How does this all line up? Reworked it, tweaked it just a little bit. And that 3rd day came in and said, all right, everybody, here's where we started. You had an individual list. Then you worked in groups of 3. Then you were in the ABC groups. Then we made those ABCs into one class list. Then you had the 4 classes we combined into one. And finally, this is what we have out of those lists. And it became something that everybody pretty well agreed on because it was student developed, student owned, but they didn't miss things that I wanted because there were times that as the teacher, my job was to help direct some of that, to reword it a little bit, to give them some guidance toward things. So it worked out really well where the students came up with the rules that we had for the class, and they were really everything that I would have asked for them to do. Being responsible, having the Chromebook charged, dealing with food and drink, making sure that their homework was done, listening while the teacher was talking, things like that. It was amazing when you gave them the opportunity. They think the same. They think responsibly and reasonably. Sometimes we just need to give them the opportunity to do that.